Thank you for having me here. I'm going to present a work on the Human Capital Index for the Italian provinces. Since I don't remember the name of the guy from World Bank, but since he talked about the Human Capital Index already, I will go very fast on the introduction and I'll go almost directly to the results, which I think are very interesting. And I also want to focus on the future development of the index because we want to move from the index of World Bank to an index which is more shaped on Italy and more in general on Western countries. So I hope to have many advice from you on how to do it. We have some idea, but new advices are always welcome. So why Human Capital Index? The idea of the World Bank is that politicians can implement policies for improve education and health and the survival of young children today, but these policies will have an impact only in the future. So it may be relevant for politicians to know today which is the impact of these elements to be more motivated to implement these kind of policies. So they wanted to build a human capital index so that the impact of these policies can be estimated today. Why should we do it for the Italian provinces? Well, the literature has evidenced big differences in the Italian provinces, both from the point of view of education and from the point of view of healthcare. Moreover, it may be interesting to know whether in time these differences are increasing or decreasing. And it may be useful to know which are the differences at province level to implement better policy and target them better. So we have decided to start using the World Bank Human Capital Index because although it has some limitation deriving from the fact that it has to be replicable all over the world, so it has some constraints both on the data availability and on the fact that the information have to be relevant in all these countries. It has the big positive effect that we can compare the Italian ranking with the world ranking. So we can have an idea of how different the Italian provinces are. The World Bank Human Capital Index is composed by three parts. The first is survival, the second is education, and the third is health. All these parts are compared with the best possible performance to have an idea of the relative size of these effects. And education and health are weighted for returns of education and health according to the international literature on the topic. Well, the returns on productivity. About survival, World Bank measures it as the under 5 survival rate, and as you can see, this is not a very relevant measure for Italy because there is a lot of homogeneity across the country. Education instead is measured as the expected learning adjusted years of schoolings, where they adjust the number of expected years of schooling according to the level of schooling. So average years of schooling according to the quality of schooling. The average year of schooling are calculated simply calculating the enrollment rate for each year and summing up. As we can see, there's already some difference across the country. We go from a minimum of 9 years to a maximum of 11.6 years. We have to say that we took the data from the Ministry of Education and they didn't have information on Trento and Bolzano provinces, so we don't have them. and also they were a bit different from the data from ISTAT, so we should probably work on it. It's probably because they are collected in different time periods across the school year. And for the quality of education, we have used the INVALSI test scores. As you can see, we have a lot of different, again, both in math and in reading scores. And we corrected the data for cheating. And so the difference across the counties is striking. The value of the math scores are particularly higher in the northern areas and lower, especially in the south and in the islands. The best performing province is Lecco, and it is highlighted in red. So we built from that the learning adjusted years of schoolings, and as you can see, there's again a difference between the north and the south, and the island are particularly bad performers. About health, the World Bank measured it as the survival rate between 15 and 60 years. And again, there is some difference, but it's not as big as in the case of education. So here are some of the results. As you can see, there is a huge difference in the human capital index, which goes from a minimum of 5.36 to a maximum of almost 0.8. It goes from 0 to 1, the index. And again, the island are the worst performers, followed by the south, the center, the north, west, and the northeast. These are the best and worst performing provinces. Again, we have the best in the north and the worst in the south and islands. To have a comparison between Italy and the world, this is striking, I think. The blue dots are the world countries, and the red dots are the Italian provinces. So the Italian provinces covers a big portion of the world ranking. And while the best performer perform as Germany, the worst performer perform as Kenya. Impressive, I think. The most driver of the results are, as I said, education measures. Indeed, over here we see the correlation between the human capital index and its components. And while there is almost no correlation for children's survival rate and adult survival rate, there is a much higher correlation for the scores and for the expected year of schoolings. Again, we see over here the human capital index under different scenarios. This is the actual human capital index, and in here we set all the survival of the children to its maximum, and it doesn't change much. In here we set all the learning adjusted year of schoolings to the maximum, and it changed a lot. And in here we set all the survival from 15 to 60 years old, and it doesn't change much again. The results are quite stable over here. Unfortunately, we had information only on 2016 and 2017, so we can compare the results only for these 2 years. Because the ministry do not provide the enrollment rate for previous years, at least on his website, and it's hard to get an answer if you write them. Over here we see the correlation between the human capital index and the income per capita of the provinces. So we see that for low level of income per capita, the human capital index increase much more when the income per capita increase, while for higher levels it is quite stable. And we can almost see two clusters, one over here and one over here, one characterized by a particularly low level of income per capita and low level of human capital index, and one characterized by higher level of income per capita and a human capital index which is more stable. Over here we replicated the results separately for using only the Lyceum scores, the technical school scores and the vocational school scores. What is interesting, I think, is that as we go on to higher, here there is the actual human capital index, and these are the results by school type. And as we move towards higher levels of the human capital index, the vocational school are much farther from the results for the Lyceum and for the technical schools. We did some robustness check to see how much our results depended on particular choices we made. So we tried with alternative coefficients and it doesn't change much. We tried with alternative test course measures and it doesn't change much. And I don't have time, so I want to go directly to the future analysis. Okay, then, well, so to conclude, we saw a lot of heterogeneity, and it was mostly driven by educational results, and it was correlated with provinces' income. About the future challenges and the building of a more Italy tailored index, or an index which can be used in general for Western countries. First of all, we believe that there are other relevant elements that should be taken into account when considering Western countries. For example, we should consider the tertiary education, which is kind of a big deal in these countries. So if you don't consider it for the human capital index, you miss a big portion of the picture, I believe. Moreover, we may think of policy that also can increase the soft skills of children, such as scuola lavoro program or the torno subito in Lazio, for example. So we should take into account of the impact of these policies as well, maybe considering the soft skills. We should take into account internal migration, because even though the policymakers make policies for education and for health in their provinces, but then children leave, then they miss some of the investments they made, let's say. So they should consider also policies to give the children the possibility to stay in the area. Finally, given the demographic crisis that Western countries are crossing, we should consider also birth rate, which is the literature has underlined that as it is very relevant for human capital. And we have seen that in some countries the proper policy has reduced the demographic crisis, so it should be considered as something the politician can make something about. For example, in France, they did a lot of, they increased the kindergarten their services and reduced the demographic crisis. Also, we should consider alternative measures of education. One of the assumptions behind the use of learning-adjusted years of schooling, as thus proposed by the World Bank, is that the children start school with knowledge which is 0, and that each year the additional knowledge is constant. So we want to use a measure for education which is more based on value added. We can do it thanks to the INVALSI data, and we can also build a measure which is more disaggregated by years, so we can give a different way to different levels of education. Okay. Also, we may consider better measures of health. For example, we may consider as a possible measure the life expectancy free of disability, or we may think to monetize sometimes some kinds of disabilities according to which are the level of pensions the INVALSI provide according to different levels of disability. And we may also think about alternative aggregation methods. So the World Bank used returns to education and returns to health because they wanted to see the impact on productivity, but we may think to choose at least these returns according to the Italian literature, not to the international literature, to have a more precise estimation.